right? I don't want to play what's called face up by always checking back the flop when I have kind of a medium strength hand that I don't want to get all in, and then my opponent can play pretty effectively against me. Usually he can just like bet the turn, shove the river, and then what am I going to do if I have pocket jacks? It's going to be a really gross spot, especially because I've turned my hand what's called face up. The way to fight against this is sometimes check back the flop here if I have pocket kings, pocket aces, ace king, which I definitely do occasionally in order to protect my checking back range. That's going to be something that you're going to see me do a lot. Any spot where I bluff a lot, I'm going to play my strong hands in the same way. Anytime where I check back and represent kind of like marginal strength hands, I'm also going to occasionally check back my air, completely giving up, or I'm going to check back my pretty strong hands to defend that range, to not let my opponents exploit me by, shoving the turn, shoving the river. Actually, I think I misspoke. If I have air on table 2, I probably just always bet the flop because, I need to balance my value in my air range there. And my opponent folds pretty quickly. And back to the action, raising 3s. Today's video is brought to you by, Sprite Zero, which is delicious and zero-y. Is that a word, zero-y? It's like nothing at all. On table 2, again, woke up with a monster, 2 hands in a row. Good thing about Rush Poker is that, I get aces or kings 1 out of 100 hands, so sometimes they happen back to back. My opponent goes ahead and raises a full $1 pre-flop. I have a hand like kings. There's actually a couple things that I can do with kings here. I can definitely call pre-flop and have a very disguised and bolstered range as I hit the flop. Right? There's going to be a lot of flops where my opponent's going to have ace-queen and the flop's going to come queen-high, and then I'm going to be able to extract a lot of value from him on future streets, especially because if I 3-bet him here, a hand like ace-queen probably is going to fold out of position. That being said, this is 25 no limit. That means I'm going to not respect my opponents as much. I'm just going to come after them and let my aggression just dominate them and force them into making mistakes. I'm definitely going to 3-bet here. Very happy to get it in. If I was playing at a different limit, one where my opponents were more aggressive, they were tighter, they were better, they would play more perfectly against me when I 3-bet them, I would consider flatting here a lot more often. But again, the weaker my opponents are, the more aggressive and more spewy I'm going to try to get them to be. On table 4, I raise pre-flop, get called out of the blinds, and go ahead and c-bet this flop. Ace, ace, 8 is what I consider to be a pretty dry flop. If my opponent doesn't have an ace, he's usually going to give up. And as the button raiser, I definitely can go ahead and represent an 8. So I go ahead and bet and get called. That's a bad spot. Now my opponent probably has a flush draw, an ace, or an 8, all of which totally crush me. I'm going to try and put in no more money into the pot. Turn is a 5. Opponent checks, I check back, and magically, I win the hand, which flabbergasts me. How could I possibly have won the hand? I go ahead and pull up the hand in the hand history reviewer, and it looks like that he had the queen high flush draw. Now, that also says that when I raised the button, my opponent called me with the queen 6 of green, which is absolutely atrocious because he's going to be out of position. It's going to be really hard to play a lot of flops. Let's say that the flop comes queen high and he faces multiple streets of action. Well, is queen 6 going to be good? He doesn't know. He's out of position. He's just facing bets. He's just going to be in the dark. Sometimes he's going to fold the best hand. Sometimes he's going to call down incorrectly, and I'm going to be like, ha, kings, ace king, or I'm sorry, aces, king queen. It's going to be really gross for him. Let's say he flops a pair of 6s. There's going to be a lot of turns and rivers that are going to come really bad if he's got a pair of 6s on the flop. So if the board was like, 6, 9, jack, if he check calls the flop, and any 7 or above is going to make his hand even worse. So he's going to get into like really, really tricky spots. Going to have to give up in a lot of spots. Going to make a lot of mistakes. So his call is pretty bad. His flop call is fine. He has a flush draw. It might be the best hand. I guess there is some value with having queen high here. If I definitely will bet this flop if I have like 4 or 5, so there is some showdown value with queen high. But that being said, usually if I'm calling with this kind of draw, if I miss my draw and my opponent has shown weakness, I'm going to go ahead and bet the river. So if I had an ace or the flush draw in my opponent's shoes, I'd start by check calling the flop. You can also check raise both of those hands, but that's another topic completely. So you check call, the turn goes check check, and with both of those hands, I go ahead and lead the river. As I said, I'm playing my bluffs and my value hands in approximately the same way, so it's going to be difficult for me to continue. If I was in my shoes and my opponent led the river, I would have folded, right? He might have had a hand like pocket nines that was going for thin value. He might have an ace. No matter what, I think it's going to be a little light to call with an underpair to the entire board, so he would have gotten me to fold the best hand. However, since he played his hand kind of passively, he did not cash in, and again, what we like to call fold equity. Made a mistake. Let me win $3.39 that I definitely did not deserve to win. Well, I deserved to win it, because my opponent sucked, but I would not have won that against a more aggressive opponent. Just kind of grinding along, really haven't gotten paid that well. I guess I got in 5s against ace-10, and the guy sucked out on me, so I got it in good, which is the important thing. Pretty standard stuff. Raise king-queen, flop, flop a good hand, go ahead and put in the money. On table 4, I hit kings again. I mean, poker's really easy when you get a lot of aces and kings. I raise in the middle position, which, as you've seen, I open with a pretty wide range, and I go ahead and get 3-bet. My opponent here, Yus, I do have some hands with. I don't know if that's from this limit, but it looks like that he's a fairly aggressive player. He 3-bets out of the blinds pretty aggressively. This is a spot where he has position on me, so it's very likely he's going to be putting in some pressure. However, kings is just such a strong hand. I'm going to be out of position for the entire hand. I'm going to go ahead and 4-bet him, that is, re-raise him, and just try to get the money all in. I can call here, and then just hope that the flop doesn't come ace high and just try to call him down and let him bluff into me. But I also think that this is a spot where if my opponent has a hand like 10s, 9s, jacks, ace king, he's just going to try to get all the money in pre-flop against me. And also I like to bluff here, so sometimes I have 6-7 and my opponent's kind of come after me a lot. I'm just going to go ahead and re-raise him, and then, what is he going to do? A little bit about my bet size. My raise size is going to be a little bit more than double what my opponent has raised me to. In general, I like to put in about a quarter of my stack when I'm making this kind of bluff, and this is a pretty gross spot for my opponent. My bluffing range here is not very wide. I'm not doing this all the time, and my value range here is very strong. Usually, in this spot, I'm going to have jacks or above, maybe even queens or above, and plus ace-king. So if he's got any kind of hand like 6-7, I'm giving him a pretty good price to call. Like, it's going to be $4 into a $10 pot. But very often, if he's got a hand, he's going to have what's called reverse implied odds. For example, if he's got a hand like king-queen here, and I have aces, well, if he flops a king or a queen, he's only going to lose more money against me. So that's going to be in a really dangerous situation for him that, he doesn't know, similar to that queen 6 hand that we saw a couple hands ago on table 4. If he flops a pair, he doesn't know if it's going to be good. He doesn't want to call too much. He doesn't want to fold too much. But because we're going to be in a huge pot, it's going to be a really big disaster if he calls off his stack poorly or if he folds the best hand. So he's going to be put into a really, really, really sick spot on future streets. Because I make this, this 675 bet with my hand like kings, hoping to get action when he's got a worse hand or, some kind of bluff, I'm also going to be doing that with my bluffing range. So doesn't really know what to do against me. And he just goes ahead and mucks his hand, so probably just had a bluff there. Maybe some hand like ace-queen that realized he's kind of boned in the face, which is a terrible place to get boned, just to put it out there. You're seeing I'm just folding some kind of awkward suited hands, which is totally standard for me. On table 2, this is a spot where I actually elect to just find a fold. Even though Captain Bird is probably not the best of players, and I say that simply because he does not have a full stack, even though I have no stats on him, I don't know if set mining here is going to be that profitable. Against some players, I can call here with pocket deuces, and and obviously get paid when I hit a set. But I can also make a lot of moves post flop when I miss, simply because I'm going to have a pretty good read on my opponent's post flop tendencies. But this is going to be a spot where, since I have absolutely no information on my opponent, if he goes ahead and continuation bets the flop, even if he checks the flop, I'm not really going to know where I stand, and I'm not going to be able to really make expert moves against him all the time. So I'd rather just take the kind of conservative spot. This is definitely on the tighter end, and I do not blame anyone for calling here, especially because if you call here, then maybe another guy will enter the pot. But another concern is that on the big blind, AKJJ Lose, or whatever this guy's hysterical name is, he doesn't have that much money, so there's always that small possibility that he's just going to go ahead and shove and end the hand, in which case I'm dumping 75 cents. And, 75 cents, that's like half a Sprite Zero. Do I really want to give half a bottle of Sprite Zero away? No, I want to keep my Sprite Zero all to myself. I really like how I just went on this entire rant about how I folded deuces and I end up calling, but I definitely think that folding there is actually totally fine. However, I don't have the power to recollect the past and figure out what I did, and I don't have the ability to look into the future and see what I do. So on table 2, the cutoff opens, and I go ahead and 3-bet him with ace-queen. Ace-queen isn't the best hand to get all in pre-flop, so if my opponent goes ahead and 4-bets me, I'm going to be often facing ace-king, or like queens and above, jacks and above. Obviously, if he's got jacks, I want to get it all in, but against his overall 4-betting range there, ace-queen's going to be kind of, as we say, boned in the face. So I'm just going to go ahead and 3-bet, hoping that my opponent only calls me out of position. Because I have position, because I'm expected to bluff here, my opponent definitely can call me with hands that I dominate. He can call me with worse aces. He can call me with, king-queen, queen-jack suited, ace-jack, ace-10 here. So very often we're going to be in a re-raised pot. I'm going to have a dominating hand. And again, we're going to get my opponents into that situation where, when he flops a pair against me, like if he flops, a pair of aces, he's going to, often be either calling off or folding badly because I'm going to have very strong range. And if he's got a hand like jacks, very often when he hits, a pair of jacks and tries to get it all in against me, he's going to realize that I have a stronger hand. Also, because I have position, I have a lot more options in controlling the size of the pot. If my opponent checks the flop, I can just check back and try to play a small pot. He checks to me, I can bet like $2 on the flop and try to play a small pot. There's a lot of things I can do because my opponent's going to check to me, because I'm kind of the gatekeeper to showdown. So there's a lot of things I can do on table 2, and so let's review our options. I can definitely just go ahead and bet $4, which is just very, very standard. I do that with all of my aces, all of my bluffs, all of my hands like pocket kings, but I decide to kind of mix it up here. I can also check back, make my hand not look like exactly what it is. I can make my hand look like pocket jacks, and if my opponent has a hand like king queen, something that's essentially air, he might try to take me off of my hand by betting the turn and betting the river really large. So this is a spot where if my opponent has absolutely nothing, I might get him to spew against me. The final option is actually the one I do, which is I make a really small bet, hoping that my opponent is going to spew into me. I do make this bet with my entire range. If I have a hand like 6-7 here, or no, 6-7 actually is a pair. So let's say I have 7-8 here, which I would definitely 3-bet pre-flop. I could go ahead and bet 250 and pretty much get my opponent to give me a lot of information about his hand. So let's say you are my opponent in this spot and you have an ace, and your opponent bets really, really small on the flop. That might be a spot where if you're a straightforward player, you're going to find it absolutely irresistible to go ahead and put in a raise, because after all, the guy bet really small. You have trips, you want to play a really, really big pot. So if I had air here, I could bet really small, and if my opponent just called me, it's much more likely that he's got a hand like jacks or queens, or even pocket tens, even something as weak as pocket eights, rather than trips, because again, it would be just so irresistible. He's got to have so much discipline not to go ahead and raise the flop with trips. Obviously, if your opponent's very sophisticated and very, very good, he can just call here and get you to do something spazzy. But against the average player, I think I can bet really small here, get my opponent to reveal the strength of his hand, and then go ahead and just monster him on future streets. So, for example, I can bet like $2 here, he just calls me, then I can just press pot on the turn, shove a ton of chips in, and if he's got a hand like jacks, he's just like, oh, BS, now I gotta muck my hand. In order to balance the times where I'm gonna do this, where I'm